Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well, and a big thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Ainsley Harvey, and I'm the Macquarie University Incubator Manager, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be bringing you this event with Tan Lee today. But before we get started, I always like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we are meeting today. Because we're meeting via Zoom, there will be many different lands. And here at Macquarie University, I'd particularly like to acknowledge the traditional owners of our lands, the Wadawurrung clan of the Darug Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I encourage all the participants here today to share the traditional owners of your land that you are joining us from today in the chat. It's always great to see how wide and diverse those regions are. We find with Zoom events, they come from near and far. So I'm sure there's many from Macquarie University, but I look forward to seeing some of the responses in the chat box shortly, which I'll just open here now. Okay, just moving things around on my screen. So the reason I opened the chat box was because this is an interactive event. So we would love for you guys as participants in our audience to ask your questions, and you can do that two ways. You can do that via the chat box, or we'll leave some time during our presentation here today to ask those who are brave enough to come off mute and ask your question directly to Tan or to ourselves. And the more questions, the better. It always makes for a far more interesting and engaging event. So I do encourage you to get involved. Okay, so I am going to close the this holding slide here so that you can see Tan up close and personal. Here we go.
Oh, wow. I love this view. I get to see lots of faces. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here, Tan. Tan's joining us directly from the US, and it's early evening there. So we really thank you for giving up your time. Now, just for a bit of background for everyone who might not know, we are really lucky here at the Incubator because we get to host the EMOTIV research arm of EMOTIV at our incubator. So EMOTIV research is headed up by Jeff McKellar, who is Tan's co-founder. So we here at the Incubator get to mix with Jeff, who's a seasoned entrepreneur most of the time. And I've had the privilege of putting on those EMOTIV headsets and really testing out my brain in a number of experiments. And I must say, from everyone who enters the incubator and gets to put on their software and their technology, it's such a buzz, and we really benefit from EMOTIV being part of our incubator program. So that's a big thank you from the incubator to us. to you, sorry. But Tan, yes, thanks again for being here. As I said, you're coming to us directly from the US, and I just thought I'd ask, what's life been like over there this past year? It's been turbulent and heartbreaking, and very different to that we've lived in Australia.
Yes, our lives have been upended in many ways. You know, I was just saying to Ainsley before that we've had more than 500,000 deaths here in the United States. The COVID situation is really bad. We are rolling out vaccines, so there is light at the end of the tunnel. But every few weeks we hear of more surges in cases because people are just not taking precautions that they need to be taking. So it's been very challenging. I have a young daughter. She's only 20 months old, and so I've been quarantining myself at home on self-imposed Yeah, so it has been very challenging for sure.
Yeah, and that's just
Towards the end of this period.
yeah, and I mean, you've just mentioned some things on the personal front, but we'll come to talk about EMOTIV, the business, shortly. But I mean, how's COVID fared for EMOTIV? I know that your workshops were shut down at times. Can you tell us a bit more
Absolutely.
about that?
You know, it's hard for everybody, and you know, we are a company that services the research community, which is a big part of our business. And so when academic institutions can't continue to operate, can't have students uh, in their labs, it's going to impact us. And so for a good part of last year, especially in April last year, we had a massive dip to the business. And then as people started to adjust to life with the pandemic and to have to kind of figure out how to continue business as usual, we've been able to pick up business, and there's been a lot more, there's been a very strong recovery the tail end of last year until now. And so I think things are looking up, but it certainly was pretty scary for some time.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
you know, I think what's more important to me as an operator, beyond you know just the business side of it and the financial impact on our business, last year was the people side of it. So you know, we have teams in Australia, in the United States, in Vietnam, in Hong Kong, and you know, governments in each of those jurisdictions have different varying ways of handling the pandemic. But we, as you know, as the leaders of our organization, also have a responsibility to our employees. And so we took a lot of responsibility in making sure that everyone was safe and healthy first and foremost, and took lots of steps before governments actually imposed any form of shutdown. So I think it was great, because I didn't want anyone with COVID on my hands, on my watch, as I said. That would be tragic. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those early days here with Jeff too. And I think for many of the companies here at the incubator, it was a really troubling time. And I'm so pleased to hear that things are looking up for you guys, and that you've found new ways of doing things, including research. And yeah, I'm sure, as a lot of people will say, there's many lessons to have come out of this time that wouldn't have been learnt if there wasn't a global pandemic. So in some ways, it's been good to live through, but as you say, it's just with 500,000 deaths in the US and heartbreaking situations. I mean, you don't wish it upon anyone. So yeah, thanks for that. That's always good to have a little bit of context from the place that you're joining us from.
Yeah.
So we'll get on to you, Tan Le, as the person, because you've got a really interesting story, and I know that you are an inspiration to people right across the world. You are, and I have to read from a list here because the list is too long for me to memorize, but you're an award-winning entrepreneur. You're the founder and the CEO of EMOTIV. You were awarded the Young Australian of the Year award in 1998. You were also named National Geographic Emerging Explorer, along with being listed in the Forbes 50 Names You Need to Know. I'm coming to the end. It's not quite finished yet. And in 2018, your portrait was added to the permanent collection of the National Portrait Gallery of Australia, which is a huge honour. And I'm heading to Canberra shortly, so I'm going to be looking for you in the gallery.
Yes, yes. Let me know when. I'll make sure that the staff can show you the portrait. It's
Absolutely.
beautiful. I call it my Titanic moment. You know how Rose has that beautiful photo, a beautiful portrait of her, and now it doesn't matter when she's old and frail. She doesn't look. She said, "You know, I was a dish once, and it's so beautiful that I can say I can look terrible from now on forward. Doesn't matter. I can point to that was how I used to look."
I'm sure you haven't changed. I'm sure you haven't changed. But I certainly look forward to seeing that one. But obviously you don't, you're extremely successful, but life hasn't always been easy for you. You started off as a refugee, and your family instilled many principles in you, obviously. And I want you to share a little bit about that, about, you know, your young life and some of those personal lessons that have kind of shaped you to be that resilient, ambitious entrepreneur that you are today.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ainsley. I would say that I wouldn't classify myself as highly successful. I'm very much a work in progress. No, it is a journey for me, and in many ways, I feel like I've been very blessed with some really great lessons throughout my life. Starting first as a migrant, as a refugee coming out from Vietnam, that very challenging time in my life, and especially for my family, was a very much a character building opportunity, because in many ways we were outsiders. And you see now, you know, 2020 was a lot more than just the pandemic. In many ways, it showed us the divides that we have in our society as well, and the biases, the prejudices that we have and we hold. And so in many ways, growing up at that time in Australia, it wasn't an easy time. And I know that for many migrants that are choosing to make Australia their home now, they're going through that transition as well. And so as a nation, we're also grappling with what it means to be Australian, and how do we embrace diversity and what that means for us. And so, you know, as someone who was a newcomer at that time, life was pretty tough. And so I think you build some resiliency in the notion of being an outsider. That outsider status was something that really helped me learn to appreciate how difference and how nurturing a comfort in a different perspective can help you along the way. I also am a woman in tech, which also kind of amplifies again that idea of being an outsider. And so over time, the brain works very much like a muscle, right? The more you do something, the more the brain is able to recognize those patterns, and it's able to do it better and better. And so in many respects, I feel that these experiences have helped me be stronger in my own confidence about what I can do, but also embracing the fact that, you know, I've got nothing to lose, really. It's all upside from here.
Yeah.
When you're starting from scratch with nothing, how much lower can you fall, really? So I think that also gives you a lot of courage to try different things, and to accept the fact that, you know, your starting point is not where you want to end up. You accept a massive amount of transformation and a lot of change as a part of what you want to embrace in your life. And I think that courage to embrace change, to embrace uncertainty, to forge new paths, to get outside your comfort zone consistently on a day-to-day basis, it makes you stronger. It makes you more resilient, and more persistent when things don't work out, you know, the way that you hope it will. And of course, through life's journey, you get your fair share of setbacks. And so it's been a great learning experience for me. And as I said at the beginning, you know, I am still very much a work in progress. I got a lot more to learn and a lot more to do ahead of me before I can kind of put up the shingles and say, you know, I kind of made it.
I don't think a person like you will ever claim that you've made it, or that you've been, you know, this total success. But I like your analogy of a work in progress. But I also find that you know, this story of resilience and courage often comes from adversity. I'm a big fan, and I'm doing a little bit of a you know, segue here. Well, not a segue yet, but I watch a lot of Anh Do's Brush with Fame, and Anh himself, you probably know, is a refugee, and I think he might be from Vietnam himself.
Yes, he is. Him and his brother. Yes.
And his show, where he interviews these famous people, I'm always so surprised by their backstory, because there's always a level of adversity that they've had to overcome. And you wonder how they did it for a start, and then how they've gone on to.
Because they have no choice. Ainsley, a lot of it is because you don't have a choice in the matter. It's either you survive and get through it and learn from that experience, or you perish. And so when life deals you a really tough hand like that, you know, it's an opportunity for character building. In some respects, the pandemic was a great opportunity for a lot of companies to learn and to really discern for themselves what matters to them. What are the things that really, really matter, and what are you going to focus on? Because you can only do a few things when you're in that survival mode. It's very healthy in many ways.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. There's no choice. You just do it. But yeah, I encourage anyone to check out those Arndo's Brush with Fame episodes on ABC iView, because they make for fantastic viewing. But thanks for sharing your story.
And he's so funny too.
Oh, he's great.
He's so funny. He makes it all so entertaining.
And he's such an incredible artist as well. It's fabulous.
Yes.
Anyway,
he's a Renaissance man, I would say.
Well, we'll move along right now because I want to talk about EMOTIV. I know a lot of people are here because it's so incredible what your technology is allowing us to do in this modern world. So for those who don't know, I'll just tell you a little bit. EMOTIV is in the business of creating technologies for people who want to understand the brain better. But Tan, you'll obviously expand on that very simple definition of your business. So tell us a little bit more about EMOTIV, what it aims to do, and where your interest in the field stems from.
Yeah, so, you know, just to put it in simple terms, you know, we try to create the best neurotechnology, make it as widely accessible as possible so that we can make lives better, right? And so the reason why I got into neurotechnology is because the brain defines who we are. It defines our perceptions, our experience of the world around us. And yet we know so little about this incredible, the gray matter that sits inside our head, right? So it's just phenomenal. If we can tap into this incredible learning machinery that exists inside each and every single one of us, we can unlock so much potential. And so that was really the goal of creating EMOTIV, is to create technologies. Neurotechnology allows us to kind of tap into the human brain in a non-invasive way, so that it has the potential to be as ubiquitous as possible, and to do it in a way that and to create it in a way that allows as many people to participate in that process as possible. So we don't want to be, you know, one of the things when I started my journey as an entrepreneur, one of the things that was really important to me was to look to models like the web and the internet, where the founding forefathers of these systems really thought very, very carefully about how the technology was going to be created and who was going to be allowed to participate in shaping it. And so allowing the technology to be shaped by the periphery and not at the center, at the core. And so this is what EMOTIV really focuses on as well. So we want to create fantastic neurotech that's really scientifically rigorous, but at the same time, we want to make it as easy for people to use, as widely accessible as possible. And that's why we're in 120 plus countries at this point, supporting research efforts across a multitude of different areas, from autism research to kids who want to control things with their mind, to flying drones, to doing consumer research. It's across the board. So it's really exciting because, the brain is involved in every facet of our lives. And so there's nothing that we can't learn more about if you can actually tap into the brain.
Yeah, and EMOTIV is doing just that. How many other competitor companies are out there doing a similar thing?
I think there are more and more companies that are starting to move into this exciting world of neurotechnology, and that's really healthy. When I first started in this space, there were very few, and it's very hard to create an industry and create some momentum around any new sector when you're the lone wolf in that space trying to make a lot of noise and raise awareness. I think it's really exciting. And one of the most, prominent names that everyone would have heard is Elon Musk. Right? He threw his efforts into the ring as well with Neuralink. Obviously, Neuralink is looking at a completely invasive technology, which is very different to what EMOTIV is trying to do, but it shows you the future, what the future could potentially look like, where it's very clear in my mind that at some point in the future, we will have neural interfaces that will allow us to connect seamlessly with our environment, right? It will allow us to have a higher level of awareness of ourselves, but it will also allow us to interface with the world around us, especially the digital world. And so creating that bridge between this analog biological system and the digital world that's out there. And so it's very exciting that not only, are the small, companies and entrepreneurs and innovators like Jeff and I, but all, and the folks at EMOTIV, but also someone who has been very prolific and very successful in his entrepreneurial pursuits, has also thrown himself into this mix and said, I believe in that future as well, and I'm going to kind of move the needle forward. Obviously, the invasive stuff, I think, is a very different domain in a different space, and will have some complexities of its own. But I think it's very exciting, nevertheless, to see that type of trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, being joined by people like Elon Musk, I mean, it's really, really exciting. And your industry is at a really exciting frontier. And with things like terms like machine learning and AI being thrown around all over the place these days, so much of that would come from, what your technology is allowing us to extract from the muscle like the brain, right?
Yes. That's right. We've been doing machine learning for so long. It's really interesting how it's become such commonplace now. Everyone talks about how it's going to, shape industries and transform businesses. But we've been doing it since day one. So it's very common to, something that we do all the time. But it's really exciting to see that the world now knows what that is.
Well, I was going to put a little caveat in. I understand the term machine learning, but I do not understand the methods behind it. So I'm sure it's just the phrase that is understood rather than the methodology behind it.
Sure.
So I'm sure that, like you said, you've been doing it from day one, and obviously we've got Bill here in the EMOTIV research team, whose expertise is machine learning. And one day I'll sit down with him and he'll explain.
And Nam and Saad as well there too. Those guys are really awesome as well. They may be a little more quiet.
Yeah. Well, maybe if anyone else wants to join me on really understanding machine learning and all its potential, we can do a little, gathering here at the incubator. But
yeah, that would be really fun.
But Tan, obviously you know your own brain pretty well. Sometimes I feel, obviously I get anxious at times, but I don't understand immediately that what I'm feeling is anxiety. And it really takes me a little moment to understand, okay, why am I feeling like this? What is it in my life that's triggering me? But obviously with you and your work and your technology, you probably are tuned in or more tuned in to those feelings because you can actually track it.
Right. Well, I think what's different is that we become more reflective of our own behaviors, and we're more attuned to it because we can quantify what's going on. So this is one of our latest gadgets. So this particular device, and you'll see this at the Macquarie incubator, right? It just looks like a pair of headphones, but I use this to track my brain. In fact, Jeff is always wearing one of these. So I take them off from time to time, but Jeff, every time I have a meeting with him, he will use his M&As, and it's really great because you can, it doesn't make you look like a cyborg, but it actually is tracking your brain activity. And so we have feedback that allows us to know how long we can focus for, um, when to take breaks, when do you get stressed, and when you should stop. And all of this feedback is really, really helpful, because you're absolutely right, Ainsley. Sometimes you don't realize that it's no longer productive. And I have a tendency, I think I'm a glutton for punishment. I try to push myself. I'm a believer in pushing to the limit. And so sometimes it does take a red brain feedback to say, okay, I'm fine, I will stop. Right. But otherwise I will keep plowing on. And I'm so used to the notion of kind of trying to push forward rather than to pause and to stop. And so it is, you recognize that you are human after all and not a machine. And you do need to pause, rest, break, and you actually perform better after that. And I think that's the key for people like me who want to continue to work and to be high performing. You actually realize that there is an optimal curve to your own personal productivity and performance. And it's not about always pushing your body's limits, but it's finding that optimal zone for yourself. And so that to me is the biggest insight that I'm learning and gleaning from the equipment and from using this technology in a more objective way, rather than just trying to push through, because this is the way I've always done it.
And obviously companies are really interested in like employee wellness. So I know that you sell these headsets, and you've just showed the newest MN8 model,
Yes.
Which has come a long, long way from some of those earlier headset designs where it was like,
yes,
you've got
it's like a spider.
You have to put it on and you look like an alien.
Absolutely.
But that's come your technology and the amount of data that you can derive from the earbud or the ear socket, whatever it's called, is quite incredible. And I assume that because of the fact that that particular piece of hardware is unobtrusive, and as Jeff says, it's just like it acts as your your Bluetooth headphones as well, and all the rest of it. Got all those cool features. So I guess that's been a really good selling point for you guys.
It is, and I think it makes people feel that this technology is less science fiction. It's something that they can see that they could potentially use themselves. And I think with technology, trying to cross that chasm from that early adopter community to the mass adoption, you have to be able to hit some of these core requirements, right? The value proposition, the effort it takes for you to use the technology compared to the value it offers to you as an individual. There has to be that value curve. And for for our EPOP product, it's really a research tool. And so for the average user, it's hard to justify, putting on a device just to measure my brain, unless I'm really trying to do research. If I just want to optimize my own performance, it's harder. Whereas if I'm just wearing a pair of earphones, headphones that I would use anyway to conduct a call, to listen to music, and on top of that, I get to learn more about myself, and I can improve my own performance, cognitive performance, and that is a much better value proposition that it can offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the few times that I've had the privilege of being part of an emotive experiment, it is really enlightening, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks for participating, Ainsley. That's so awesome.
Well, I had no choice. I mean, I work with
there you go. Yes. We could be a persistent mob.
I got quite nervous ahead of it because I thought, oh gosh, I wonder if Jeff will think less of me as a result of, seeing my brain functioning. It's been a really interesting experience, and Emotive are still continuing to, call for research participants, and we do a lot of cool things at the incubator with
if anyone's interested, we'd love to have you come learn about yourself, and at the same time help us understand the brain a little bit more, push that a little bit further.
Yeah, so we can provide some details to anyone interested about how to sign up, but yeah, there's constantly things going on that you can be a part of. So I really do encourage that that experience, because as I said, it's very, very enlightening. Now I want to move on. You've touched on a few of the really powerful ways that this technology is changing lives. But I think as part of our promotion of this event, we showed that incredible footage
Of
of
Rodrigo.
Rodrigo, a
Yes.
quadriplegic, driving a race car with mind control. And I remember the first time that I saw this, and I had known Jeff for about 6 months, and I'm like, why haven't you showed us this before? Thank you. And it is truly incredible, and I hope everyone has had a chance to look at it. We'll post the link.
It's really amazing, even for me, right? Having done it for so long, when I met Rodrigo and knew he had driven the Formula One car using his mind, I was blown away. It moved me to tears because you meet Rodrigo, he's such an inspiring person, but you can't help but realize what a terrible tragedy, what a terrible awful situation had happened to him at 18, having been carjacked in Brazil and shot and then left for dead. It's just awful what he had to go through. And then to see how debilitating that is, and then to have him sit in a Formula One car and drive around a racetrack only with his thoughts, and then the exhilaration in his voice as he recounts that experience. I actually just caught up with Rodrigo last week, so it's still very fresh in my mind. And we have this really special bond now because we have that shared experience. It was just so incredible for me.
Yeah.
You know,
And
yeah, so it's pretty beautiful.
I guess it's not as simple as just getting in the car and using your mind to drive this Formula One race car.
No, I mean, that car was built special for him.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have pedals, it doesn't have a steering wheel, but it does have a lot of sensors. It's rigged to, he spent 3 weeks training on the BCI detection so that he could consistently, push forward, turn right, turn left at will. So he was really invested in that experience, and he didn't know if it was going to work. And I remember him saying that he was unsure, and then when he finally sat in the car, and then he thought go like forward, and it started to just rev and go. He thought, "Wow, this is crazy!"
Yeah.
It's just so wonderful. It's such a beautiful story, and I feel very privileged to have had play some part in that.
And tell us a little bit more about this brain training that goes on behind it, because Jeff did tell us a few things, and I don't know if I've got it right, but and I don't think I've got it right, but like to accelerate, he thought of that feeling of kicking a soccer goal, and to brake,
Exactly.
he thought of lemons. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that.
What you want to do, so it's essentially just a set of machine learning algorithms. And so what you want to do is you want to show the machine learning algorithms how you think about a particular thought. It doesn't have, it does have some parameters in there already, but you could potentially think of anything really. For Rodrigo, he really wanted to have very distinct thoughts. And so the more distinct the thought pattern and more clear in your mind, and the easier that you're able to get to that same idea, and the faster you're able to come to that distinct idea, the better your algorithms are going to be. Because we're just saying every time your brain thinks of this same thought, and if you can distill that thought as clearly as you can in your mind, it will recognize and associate that with a particular command. And so so that was what Rodrigo was doing. And he's saying that, okay, here's my neutral state when you're training the algorithms, and here is my brain state for driving forward or turning right or turning left. And it's making that association. So the more distinct in your mind, the better off you're going to be.
Yes. It is like, even listening to you explain it and just seeing the footage, you said you would reduce to tears. I remember myself feeling like, I think I was teary at the time, because you just think about the potential for people who live with such a disability. I mean, this has far-reaching potential. It's so exciting, right?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
think it's what keeps us, going to work every day, even when it's challenging.
yeah. So have you got any other cool projects that you can talk about?
Oh, projects that we could talk about more challenging. There's a lot of projects at the moment.
Yeah.
We did one. We did one with ASICS. We've done one with Dell that are public on the role of, actually, the one that we did with Dell was around the role of technology, especially through the pandemic and its impact on stress for workers, knowledge workers. I think that was pretty interesting. Jeff was and the team there did a big job with doing the data collection for that. And then we've got some really cool brands as well, but I can't share it. And I know you guys probably get to see what's going on there with the data collection, but yeah, it's very hush hush, but it's really exciting. Hopefully we'll get to showcase what we've been working on in a public way later on this year. But the Dell project, that very first part of that program, we shared, I think, the end of last year, and that was pretty interesting. We learned a lot about how important technology is, and also the age factor. Right? So young people are more easily frustrated by bad tech than old people. As I said, I can tolerate stuff, and I think because we're not digital natives in the same way that the younger generation is, they have a much lower threshold of tolerance compared to myself or my mom potentially. So and that was reflected in the study, which was quite peculiar to me but now come think about it, it makes intuitive sense in some respects.
Yeah. No, Jeff is very good at telling us that he can't disclose information. So that's why I asked you if there's anything that you can talk about. But yeah, I think that everyone should go have a read of that Dell study because it is really interesting. And yeah, these secret projects are some of the things that you can be a part of here at the research hub that EMOTIV runs at the incubator. So another reason to get involved. But
it's pretty interesting. It's really, really interesting. Like some of the findings are fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke earlier on about your mission to make sure that your technology is like accessible and that's widely available. And I've heard you give interviews in the past where you reflect again on your personal life and growing up in that developing country of Vietnam, and ensuring that your mission is to ensure that no one gets left kind of behind.
Yes. I mean, I think it's really central to what we value at EMOTIV. And this is not just my own personal value, but it's shared across the entire organization. It's something that we really deeply believe in. And it's, we can't help but recognize the huge wealth disparity that exists in our world. The concentration of wealth in the top 1%. How could the top 1% control more than 83% of the world's wealth? That is staggering to me. And you have individuals that have personal wealth that dwarfs countries. So it is the economics of what we've created and the incentive structure of what we value as society is somewhat warped in the wrong way. And I think that we do have and yet the future has yet to be written, right? It's not here yet. And so as individuals, as people that feel that we have some level of agency in what future gets created, and especially now as a mother, I really feel that it is our responsibility to try and do something about that. So making sure that and for us at EMOTIV, it's not just about access, it's about inclusion as well. Access, a lot of the Silicon Valley has always been about access, right? Technology entrepreneurs really focus on the access side of things. So we make our technology smarter, faster, cheaper, and widely distributed so that more people have access to that technology. But at the same time, that doesn't address the wealth inequality and disparity because they don't get to participate on the inclusion side of the creation, the wealth creation. And so for us, it's both. It's access, but also inclusion. How do we ensure that more people get to participate in shaping that technology and to participate in making sure that they can generate wealth from that technology platform that we've created. And then, we're also thinking about, diversity and inclusion from the standpoint of what data we're analyzing as well. We want to make sure that the data we're analyzing represents the global community. We don't want algorithms that are only going to perform best for Western educated countries, because that's where, most of the money comes from, because that's not going to create an inclusive product either. And so I think, as inventors, as innovators, as entrepreneurs, we do have a responsibility to really think broadly about the stakeholders and the users of our technology, and the implications of what we create 5, 10, 15 years down the line. It's not easy to know how the future will shape up, but you definitely want to be very thoughtful about that. And I think that at Emotive, we think long and hard about what it is that we're creating, and we want to be really good stewards of technology and not just create technology for technology's sake. And I think that's very, very important. Unfortunately, it's not a sentiment that is often encouraged in Silicon Valley, because what's encouraged here is really hyper growth, and that's more important than anything else. And sometimes I don't think that is the right yardstick that we should be measuring companies, leaders against.
Well, it sure sounds those principles are embedded at every level of your business. And there's a lot of people here that, hats off to that, because it's really, really important stuff.
It's very important. It's very important. We can't lose sight of that.
No. Okay, well, I'm going to pause briefly, because the next part of our chat, I plan to talk about Tan's, startup experience, and, as a founder in tech, and as a woman, and some of those challenges. But I'm going to provide a chance now. There's a few questions coming through on the chat, which I'll read out, but I'll also ask in a minute if anyone wants to come off mute and ask their own question, you can do so. So we've got a question here, Tan, that says, for someone new in neurotech, what advice would you give, and where do you believe they should start?
Oh, okay. Maybe you can elaborate on your background, because I think a lot of it, good advice can only come when you really understand what your starting point is, because everyone's starting point and where your end goal is very important, right? So I think understanding that, because if I just address that in a vacuum, it's not going to be particularly helpful. So maybe that individual.
Yeah, Zufra.
Zufra?
Would you like to just come off mute, Zufra, if you're in a position to do so, and just give a little bit about your background, perhaps?
I'll unmute myself. So hi. So recently I became interested in neurotechnology after reading your book, The Neurogeneration. And a lot of the concepts were very interesting, because they incorporated a lot of things that I'm interested in, like machine learning. So I'm doing some research myself on neuroscience and neurotechnology, but there's not exactly a community in my school that's related to neuroscience and neurotechnology. There are at other schools, but not in my school. So where would I be able to start off with to actually get myself into a neurotech community?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. Can you code, Zulfa? Or are you just getting into the neuroscience things? There is just so many tools out there now. I mean, GitHub has a bunch. We've got APIs that are available that you can tinker with. We just announced up to $1 million royalty free on the use of the BCI API. So if you want to build stuff and you want to release stuff to the community, you don't have to pay us any royalties until you've made, up to $1 million or 10,000 users of the technology. And if you don't make anything, you don't ever have to pay anything. So, I mean, we are really trying to encourage more and more participation and more people to create things. So, there's stuff that we've put out. There's so many companies now that is doing some pretty exciting work. So it depends on whether you want to do invasive work or non-invasive work. But I would love to, you're a female in tech, so hit me up on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, and I'll see if I can point you in the right direction.
For sure, thank you.
No worries. Yes, so lovely to hear from you. And thank you for reading my book.
Yeah,
How good.
So sweet.
It's always good to build in that plug for a book. And it came naturally. That's awesome. There's another question here about any further any further thoughts that you could share on how we can include the less wealthy and the less privileged community into building technologies for the future. I mean, you have explained a little bit about how EMOTIV does it, but do you have any other thoughts?
I think that there's a lot of things that we can be thinking about. So technology, the simpler things become, the more accessible it is. So for example, previously, before we created these tools that allows end users to kind of fit the device themselves, to create it so that it can be self-fitted, you needed a technician. So you'd have to have a grant from a university. So trying to tackle all of the barriers. So that's the way I think about it. Right? How do you chip away at the barriers and the friction points to make it easier and easier for people so that more people can access it? So if you're looking at machine learning tools, instead of making it harder, trying to figure out, are there ways that you can simplify the ways for people to build feature extraction models, or do signal processing blocks so that they can understand what they're doing, but they may not have to do all of the coding themselves. I think the more that we can chip away at that, the more we can move the pipeline down, right, to people who are younger, people who have less money, to a whole wide range of different facets of friction points that you could slowly chip away at. So that's the way I think about it. But I'm sure the other thing that we're thinking about very heavily is around inclusion on the financial rewards. So one of the things that I just mentioned before around the API usage is we do want to encourage participation. We do understand that people think about when you're a new indie developer and you're thinking about spending time building something, if you have to pay 30% of whatever you generate to the platform maker, it's an impediment to you because you're kind of trying to dig yourself out of a hole. What if we lift some of those impediments so that you don't have to pay anything until you actually make some real money? Will that help you? So we're experimenting with a lot of different ways to try and bring more people along with us on this journey, because we do think that we could create a really transformative, exciting future for a lot more people if we did it this way.
Yeah.
I see a friend.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, that was my question. Do you mind if I expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, no,
it's been a long time. So great.
Yeah, it's so long. So nice to see you.
Yeah, I actually just see this on LinkedIn. So I thought, it's lunchtime. I can just pop in and join in. And it's great to see you. And I've heard that you got a new family member as well. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, so on that question, I think the one thing that I'm thinking about it then is around ethics, around future technology and AI. So there's so with technology and AI and machine learning, we need data to train machine learning. And it's sort of like when we, one thing about I'm in finance, right? We talk about garbage in, garbage out. Whatever we put to train the machine, right? We get that could be biased. And the one point that I'm thinking about in relation to the point about inclusion of less developed and less privileged community in there, and probably more, I would say, broader industry experience that you've seen so far across corporates, not just in EMOTIV, but also all the other big companies as well. How's that being addressed, like in terms of the data to train?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and this is why we focus on data across the whole global community, because I actually believe that the data has to be representative of the population when you're training your machine learning models. Otherwise, you're going to build implicit bias into your models so that it will work best on Western educated people, and in that instance, you're going to have things that will just work better for that community, right? Whether it's a vaccine, whether it's a BCI, whether it's a tool that understands cognitive performance. I do think that companies need to be thinking about that more. we are trying to be better in Silicon Valley. I am seeing companies trying to be more thoughtful about that. But unless you built that into your model from the ground up and you're thoughtful from the get-go, if you're a company that's been around for 20 years and your whole mode of operandus is very different, there is a natural inertia, right, that you have to kind of counterbalance, which takes time. And so I think companies like Google is trying very, very hard to think about how to tackle AI. They've received a lot of flack in recent months in terms of what's happened with some of the members of the AI team. So I do think that it's something that, they are a work in progress as well. I was just talking to their team just a couple of weeks ago as part of International Women's History Month here in the United States. And I think it is very, very challenging for companies like that want to do good, but seemingly struggle as well. So it's something, I think, because we're talking here to a community of people that are looking to start companies, that may be in organizations, I think we have a great opportunity to address that. The other thing that I've noticed, even with corporate boards, there is a greater recognition of diversity and the value of diverse voices. So we're starting to see it trickle through, but it's going to take a long time before data is actually representative of the real diversity that we see in the global population across the board. Like countries like Vietnam, for example, we're not going to have a lot of data right off the bat. So we have to build a lot of infrastructure around data. We have to think about how that exchange happens. We're not as sophisticated as Europe in terms of data protection, data privacy, data security. And so it's not just looking specifically at data collection and retrieval, but it's also about how do you safeguard the individuals in that process. Do you want to be like China, where everyone is just going to donate data to the state, and then what happens to it? Who benefits from it? Do the individuals benefit, or is it some state-owned entity that benefits from it? And so what does those economics look like? And so I do think that at a global level, there is a lot of, this is a new emerging field, and as a society, we need to actually educate ourselves about our relationship with data, our relationship with AI and machine learning, and so that we can have a really thoughtful conversation about it with informed ideas, right? So that I do think it's quite challenging, because it's not just, so companies like ours, it's easy right now because we're collecting data across the board, we're allowing people to participate in that way. But when you're looking at a much larger scale, it's quite challenging for places like Vietnam. As you look at China and Vietnam, it's quite a different philosophy. Look at China and the United States, very different philosophy in terms of AI and what it can do and the potential as well.
Mm.
Thanks, thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, very thoughtful.
I'm glad that you had a reconnection with an old friend there, Tan. That's always nice. Isn't it?
It's always nice. And it's great that we chose the lunch hour, because I guess this allows more people to join.
It does. Now I've got, before I move on, because I do want to touch on the fact that you're a woman in tech and some of those lessons that you've learned as a startup founder, but we have obviously these series, as we're part of the university, are popular with students and particularly some young graduates. And I've just seen a question from Lucy, who has graduated from computer science, and she's obviously interested in neurotech in Australia, but notes they're not taking a lot of grads at the moment. I think she's asking, is EMOTIV hiring? And if not, what's your advice?
Yeah, we're always looking for good people from time to time. So yes, hit us up if you're looking for work, because we are hiring. I think we're about to add 3 more people to the Sydney lab there. So yes, look us up, and if you're you never know, we could create a position for you maybe. So we'll see. So what else? What was the other question?
There's one that I'll do one more, and then we'll move on, and any time remaining we'll ask a few more. So Kath Thrump, she says that Tan mentioned inertia in older companies and organizations, and notes that she's been dealing a lot with this in her workplace. So from a neuroscience perspective, are there ways that we can effectively address this or get some momentum with the inertia?
It's a great question, Kath. And I think about it, I think that every organization is slightly different. And I do talk to a number of very large companies. And I also sit on the board of QBE. And I think we're doing a pretty good job at QBE in terms of thinking about, how do we embrace different opinions? How do we embrace new voices? Do we embrace new perspectives? Even as a very large global insurer that has been around for over 150 years, right? So I do think that there are corporates that are trying to do a really good job, and it's very thoughtful about thinking about the responsibilities, but there's no silver bullet either, right? There will be areas where we will do a really good job, and there will be areas where we may make mistakes and falter, and we just have to learn how to address that in a very transparent and authentic way and with high integrity. And I think that's what you're looking for, right? You're looking for, I think that's the most important thing that we want to ask our leaders is that you can't expect perfection, right? No one is perfect. But what you're looking for is people who has high integrity, who's willing to learn, who's willing to acknowledge mistakes when they happen, and is willing to find a path forward that is inclusive. And so I think that's all you can hope for. And so, that's what I'm looking for. That's the yardstick for me. It's not so much, did you make a mistake? It's really how you're dealing with it. And do you have the right do you have a real genuine desire to make a positive change?
I think that's a good answer, and I hope that helps Kath and provides some inspiration that there is hope. Now, we have only allocated an hour for this chat, and I swear it could go on for another 2 at least, but I am going to ask Tan a question about being a startup founder, and particularly as a woman in tech, and you've already described the experience of that as kind of being like an outsider. We have a lot of people on these calls who want advice about how you did it. What are some of the lessons you've learned and the challenges that you've had to overcome to get to where you are today? So however you'd like to answer that, maybe particularly for women, seeing that it's the end of Women's History Month in the US.
Yeah, that's right. The way that I think about it for me is that one thing that I've learned over time is to be very, very honest about my own abilities, my strengths and my weaknesses, and be willing to learn. And I think that that's probably the most enduring thing that you want to be able to have as a startup founder, because it's not about you so much. It's about your capacity to learn and to adapt and to lead, to bring people along with you. And so, your skill set is not going to be fixed. And so if you want to be a startup founder and you want to be successful at that, it's not just about being good at one thing, right? You might start off your career being a really good individual contributor. You might be really great at machine learning or data science. That will get you so far, but it won't get you the whole way. And so really being able to be very self-reflective and to really understand where your gaps are, and then being able to fill out those gaps over time with other people, because you're much stronger together, right? It is about teamwork. It is about, who can you assemble on the bus with you, and which seat you give them on that bus, right? Do you as a CEO or as the person that's driving the organization forward, you've got to figure that out. You've got to figure out, who do you want to put on that bus with you, and where do you want to put them, right? Which seat do you want them in? Because that really sets the tone for the organization. Because you are just the sum of your people at the end of the day. The company is nothing without good people in it. And so, you have to really recognize that. And you're only one part of the equation. You can't do it all. So I think for me, it's really been a constant willingness to learn and to be as reflective as possible about my own shortcomings, and where I can, how to bridge those gaps when they come up. Because you're always going to come up short somewhere.
Yeah, and to acknowledge that and to be aware of it. That's some really great advice, and very practical in a way too, because you can set out right now and get to know those strengths and weaknesses better. But your life in Silicon Valley, and as a woman, and you're mixing it up with, you know, the Googles of the world. What's it been? A relative, like positive experience, or what's
overall? It's been really positive. You know, I've lived out here since 2005. I wouldn't stay unless it was compelling for me to do so. I think there is something quite intoxicating about being in the epicenter of innovation, right? There is so much happening here, and you do feel like you have a finger on the pulse of what's going on and how things are shaping, and it's exciting to see how fast companies can grow. But at the same time, I think it's really important to recognize where it's deficient as well, and recognize that you have agency to make a difference. It doesn't have to be that way, and you don't have to continue to perpetuate those things that you don't believe is right. And so I think that's the thing for me, is to make sure that I forge my own path, right? To have the confidence and the courage to say, I don't want to be a part of that. I believe that I can do something different and still be successful at that, and continue to forge my way, despite, you know, the setbacks or the challenges that might come my way from time to time. And so I think that's really important as well.
Yep, and that does a full circle right back to your start of life too, doesn't it? So I think that's a really nice place to end on that full circle. And Tan, I just want to thank you so much for being here today. There's a whole lot of comments in the chat box where people are inspired and have really enjoyed this conversation. So
thank you. It's been so much fun to spend this time with you all. Thank you for making the time to come and join me today. It's been really great. It's so nice to see all these faces too.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So I look forward to the time when you're back in Australia and we can catch up here at the incubator.
Yeah, come and see, say hi when we're able to travel again. That'd be so wonderful.
That's right. But in the meantime, Tan, I wish you and your family and your daughter, who's been very, very good this whole time, I must say, all the very best.
Daddy's the best daddy.
It's definitely you need it. It's a teamwork there too, isn't it? It's
totally.
all about who you've got on your team. So we'll leave it there for now, so you can go have your dinner and a restful evening. And a big thank you everyone for joining us here at the Incubator. If you want to find out more about the Incubator, Google us. Applications are currently open for new startups to join our program. So you get to mix it up with, you know, the co-founder of EMOTIV, Jeff, and a whole bunch of other really great, inspiring people that we have here on a daily basis. So if you're interested in starting up your own business, get in touch. But for now, thank you everyone again, and have a pleasant afternoon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.